Hello, welcome to Nisht for Me, the podcast that examines the ins and outs of British Jewish culture.
Today, we're going to get into the wonderful world of kashrut, keeping kosher. Because I don't know about you, Az, but often when I've introduced myself as a Jew, when it has been revealed to non-Jews that I'm Jewish, and that one of the things that they want to ask straight away has been like about what we eat and what we're not allowed to eat. And it goes very quickly. So, do you have two dishwashers? Which is just a fascinating question, really. I suppose it's such a fascinating idea that somebody would have two dishwashers in your house.
I think people, maybe that shows our age. I feel like people who sort of really look on Rightmove a lot would notice that. I think the dishwasher line, that to me, that's just aspirational. I just want two dishwashers.
I think obviously it is just, such an amazing idea that you'd have two dishwashers in your home, and I'd have to say, no. That is really not my level. Let's get into it.
Hey, we're aiming for it.
I know.
But when we redo the kitchen, which is going to be a long time in the future.
Are you actually going to do two dishwashers if you can?
I think we will, yeah.
For milk and meat or just for efficiency?
Both.
So we should probably start by declaring our levels of kosherness.
Okay.
Spoiler alert, Arron wins, basically.
On a very sort of binary level of, what's what, but...
Yeah, I would say that my relationship with keeping kosher is probably best described as unhinged. It's, but maybe this will be familiar to some of our listeners. I mean, in our home, we do keep milk and meat. We have milk plates, we have meat plates, but we also have takeaway plates, which are kept in a back cupboard. They're often the broken bits of crockery that are still good, but and also we do what our lovely friend Ian Tussey coined "glat in the flat."
And one of my favourite sayings ever.
It's absolutely fantastic. He really has a skill set for this kind of thing. So we keep a kosher meat in the home, milk and meat separate in the home, as I've said. But when we're out, it's not quite the case. So, we will eat unkosher meat, not trafe, not like pig or shellfish or what have you, but,
Deer?
Deer, what is that?
Venison?
Venison, I don't know, yeah. That's an issue for me. But, but that's not always been the case for me personally. But it was kind of how I was raised. That was how I was raised, that we could have a cheeseburger out, but there would be no cheese. This
comes under the phrase, doesn't it? Do you eat meat out?
Do you eat meat out? Do you think any other community has ever used that? Do you eat meat out? It's just so funny.
It's a weird phrase.
But yeah, that's where we are. Maybe it's not entirely as bonkers because maybe other people do something similar, but
you also say bonkers. I mean, you could describe the whole thing of kashrut as unhinged. I think, and this is, I'm really clawing back into my cheder days, but I feel like...
I love when you bring up the biblical bit.
Well, I mean, I could be entirely wrong. I could be misremembering a word, but I feel like kashrut is, I think it's called a chok, which is where
that's the sound.
It's sexy, right?
Yeah.
Where I think it's entirely faith-based. You only do it. There's no sort of while lots of people will say, it's milk and meat, for example, is better for your digestion or whatever. That none of it doesn't say that in the Torah or whatever. It's just a purely faith-based practice to set you apart from other people.
But was it not originally set in hygiene? Like back in the day, not eating seafood because
possibly,
right?
But none of that's written down.
Okay.
There might be a Dear Diary somewhere, but it's not like a midrash or anything. Again, I'm not speaking as an authority here, but chok is basically where something is you do it because God told you to do it. And you don't really question it. So in that sense, the whole thing is not unhinged because people have deep and real faith, but it's not based in reason.
No.
So, and I think both of us, while you say I win, no halos, please. Because again, our level of kashrut would be, is different to others and also less than others. There are people who do plenty more than us. We don't follow everything. So we're kosher in that we keep kosher, we don't eat meat out, but we'll happily eat fish or vegetarian at a non-kosher restaurant, which somebody who is Shem Shabbat or fully follows the laws of kashrut wouldn't do. That's sort of our version. But at the same time, we also have takeaway plates, but they're for something different. Therefore, if basically, if we have a takeaway, it would only ever be fish or vegetarian. But because that's been cooked in a non-kosher kitchen, we don't want to have that on our home plates, so that if Anna's parents come, they wouldn't feel uncomfortable that non-kosher food has been consumed on those plates. So just a different level of takeaway plate.
Wow.
We're so inclusive. God, it's so progressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say it's a faith, sort of based on faith and belief, because I wonder if a lot of people keep kosher or to some degree who have zero belief in God, that's a kind of a facet of being Jewish and culturally Jewish, isn't it? But maybe, and that might be something we can come on to later when we talk about why we do what we do.
Yeah.
But how did we get here?
But where does it want to go?
As I've alluded to, I've had a bit of a journey with it, as one would say. So I was raised the way, I've kind of maybe gone full circle. I was raised the way I currently live. And, you know, apart from, you know, funny phrases like, do you eat meat out? My brother would be obsessed with, are these sausages chicken or pork? Chicken or pork? Because he was obsessed with meat, but he knew he wasn't allowed to eat pork sausages out. He could eat chicken. So at every like sort of breakfast buffet or what have you, where it wasn't an entire, you know, obviously apparent, but I remember we went to Canada and we went to a barbecue at some really frum cousins of ours. Right. And my brother was, I don't know how old I might have been 5, my brother might have been 7. And I mean, I don't quite remember this, but my parents talked about it for years to come because they were doing sausages on the barbecue, and my brother was about to say, are these sausages chicken? And apparently my dad leapt across and slapped his hand over his mouth.
I think you said just slapped him.
Just to try and shut him up, like, no, not here. But yeah, that was our upbringing. I kind of kept to that sort of way of doing things. I did go through a phase, possibly at university, where I adopted a similar policy as the US did. Homosexuals in the military was don't ask, don't tell. When it came to sausages, I'm like, if I don't know, then maybe it's fine.
Weirdly, I adopt the same policy in Israel with regards kosher meat. So now it's quite hard to go to a kosher restaurant in Tel Aviv.
Is it?
Yeah, the policy was always, well, all the meat's kosher in Israel. Obviously. And still, I sort of operate under that thing. So even if there's shellfish or pork on the menu in Tel Aviv, I'm sort of like, yeah, but the meat's kosher.
Yeah, it just might not be, you know, Beth
But the good, and like I do, it's not fully don't ask, don't tell, but I think the benefit of being in Israel is that the waiter or waitress will understand you. If you sort of say, can I have that without dairy? Yeah. Or is the meat kosher?
We used to, growing up, also have takeaways. Not in the house, not as in with meat, because obviously we maybe go and have like sort of sweet and sour chicken and whatever and chili beef at a Chinese in a restaurant, but we would never have that takeaway home. Right. But we did get to a point where we could have it in the garden.
Come rain or shine.
No, I mean, it was this is batshit. I mean, talk about, you know, the ins and outs and batshits of Jewish culture, but I don't know, my dad just sort of felt if it was in the garden, it wasn't in the home, which is perhaps something, the concept of the Jewish home is something we could talk about another time. And then when my dad got ill, he got dementia and he ended up in a home. Prior to that, he was in a sort of a hospital ward, which was as grim as it sounds. And I remember just coming home from visiting him, and my mum, and it was cold, and my mum said, right, we're getting a Chinese takeaway, and Ben and I were like, what? How are we going to eat this in the garden? She's like, we're eating it inside. And I think, you
like
know,
a small act of defiance.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Right, yeah.
As in, I think, you know, the sort of the thinking there was, fuck this shit. But yes, so that was where we were, and then it actually, as things got worse, as my mum then became ill, I transgressed even more. And in fact, I don't know if my brother will forgive me. Oh, no, I don't think he cares. But there was a time where my brother, who lives in America, came to visit my mum, who was in Christie's Cancer Hospital having a very intensive procedure called a stem cell transplant, which was ultimately did sort of give her, put her into remission, but it made her very poorly in the process. And he came, got off the flight. I took him into Christie's to see mum, and that afternoon we were going to see my dad in Heathlands, the care home that looked after him so beautifully, but his dementia was quite advanced by then, and he was starving, and he's like, come on, let's go we went to a cafe across the way from Christie's, and he ordered a bacon balm, and I did too, and it was just, and I was like, you know what, Ben, yeah, I mean the worst part about this, or perhaps the most practical part, was that this was Erev Kol Nidre.
So, as if anything is the perfect time to do it.
Exactly. I thought, well, you know, we've got time to make good on this.
Exactly.
So that was where we were, and then I could go on and on about various things that I dabbled in, and
must have made the sort of, what did you start your fast on, awkward? Just a couple of bacon butters.
Oh, ever so thirsty. Are you thirsty? And then I met Jamie, my now husband, who was brought up a similar way to me and didn't, you know, transgress in any way. Not because he was particularly observant, but because he was just incredibly fussy with food.
Right.
And so the idea of eating anything new that he had not been introduced to as a child, nisht for him.
Right.
And when we were living together in rental, we did bring unkosher meat into the house, as in unkosher chicken and blah, blah, blah. And I said, like a crazy woman who, you know, shared a prosciutto board with my non-Jewish friends when I went out for dinner, I said, when we buy a place, I'd like to have a kosher home. And he turned around quite fairly and said, fair enough, but stop eating the chaser out, because that's just a stretch. Like, that is just an unhinged step too far. So that's what happened. And
so that's the journey. It's a journey. Yeah, that's unique to you, though.
Yes. Yeah. And I literally got dipped in that mikveh not having eaten anything prior, you know.
Just there with a bag of pork scratchings in the mikveh. It's out of the water, it's fine.
God, could you imagine? And pre-wedding, that the one and only time, it was very nice. It was at Happy Chaim, our kids' Jewish studies teacher, her mikveh. Oh, it's like a spa. It was beautiful. It's actually a very emotional experience. Anyway, came out kosher, and I was
happy days,
sort of.
Well, that's it. But it's, you know, I guess you could also describe it as a journey, but a much more straightforward one, thankfully. You know, minus the sort of parental trauma.
Well, yeah.
And but I was brought up kosher, both in and out of the home, but was also a fussy eater as a kid, which definitely made eating out difficult for my parents. Yeah. But I had, as a result, similarly sounding to your brother, like an obsession with meat. And I think because I couldn't have it a lot, you know, it was when I could have it, it would be like, oh, meat, the holy grail kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And again, you sort of I'd go to Israel and try and sort of only eat meat during every meal.
I remember when we were in Eilat and we went out.
We went to like an all-you-can-eat meat place. You
gave yourself meat sweats.
Meat sweats, yeah.
Which was fun on a night out.
Introduced to the meat sweats, yeah, absolutely. It doesn't line the stomach steak, I don't think. So, like, you know, if like a fish supper on holiday in Israel would be seen as like a failure that I'd think about for years afterwards. I have matured since then. I used to, I think throughout growing up, I would go, if we went to a restaurant, I'd look at a menu and sort of play a game of here's what you could have won, whereby I'd be like, well, this is what I'd be ordering if I wasn't restricted. And then I'd go and look for the things. Again, I've grown out of that. Now I don't even, you know, it's quite impressive in a way. You just zone in on what you can have, and it's sort of like you don't even see the rest of the menu. But this is sort of confession time. Oh God.
To who?
To my dad and my mum. And is that when I went travelling after uni, and I didn't have any intention to not keep kosher. I just sort of hadn't really thought about it. And I just sort of thought, we'll see how I get on. It could be tricky. It might be an opportunity to experiment a little bit.
That's what travelling's for, expanding your mind.
Expanding your palate. And I remember being about 10 days into Brazil, which is not a sort of veggie-friendly country.
Right.
And it was very expensive there, and we were doing like kind of supermarket shops. And I remember sitting on a bench outside of a supermarket, squeezing tuna mayo out of a weirdly, like a toothpaste container is how they'd stored it there, squeezing it into my mouth thinking, I'm not sure I can do this for 7.5 months. And that...
7.5 months? That's how long you went travelling?
Yeah. And that night I decided that I was going to, for the duration of travelling, eat meat out. So not eating any treif, not eating any animals that were forbidden, but having non-kosher meat in a restaurant, and it was I mean, for the first week or so, there was all the feelings. There was intense.
Yeah, what was your first time like? Do you remember it?
Yeah, not great. It was like a Brazilian buffet. Lots of people, understandably, in Brazil, not loads of people speak English. So it was very much, it was like, it had very basic. It was like vaca for like cow, or like moo, or like, it was like porco, because everything was just like meat in a sauce. And I really didn't want to eat anything that was like, trafe. But so yeah, I didn't thoroughly enjoy it at first, but by the end I booked myself a kosher meal for the flight home, and I thought that's the cutoff point.
That's
basically
your mikveh dip.
That's my mikveh dip. Yes.
Yeah.
And by the end of it was a bit of a tick list. It was like, oh, I wonder what KFC tastes like. And I remember being having like a family bucket to myself in like
the airport before you got on the plane.
Not quite, but near enough. Yeah. And yeah, I felt like, and I sort of, that was, for me, I sort of felt like, okay, well, I've experienced it now, and I'm glad I had, because it meant I got to have, like steak in Argentina and stuff, but I haven't gone back since, and that was sort of but I've never told my dad that. I've always been too sort of scared, even though my dad grew up not kosher, and we only found that out, like, when we were probably teenagers, and we're a bit like, what do you mean? And it turned out my grandpa used to have, like, he, after the Holocaust, lost his faith and would, but they were still very much, a kosher home was a must, but he would have, like, chazar out and the rest of it. And it was only when he sort of almost went the other way. I think when my grandma got ill, when she was, I think, in her 40s or 50s, he then refound his faith and started praying again, and kept kosher. And from that point on was, Shem Shabbat and and the rest of it. And also, I think when my mum was ill, when we were very young, all it coincided at similar time, and that brought him back to religion. But yeah, so that was sort of our journey, or my journey, really.
It is really interesting, isn't it? How it can relate to where you are emotionally, personally.
Definitely.
Like, what's going on in your family. Like, I think for me, it was obviously clearly something I could control in a world that felt like chaos. While I was in my 20s, both of my parents were gravely ill. And also, just being in your 20s, you're quite all over the place.
Yeah.
Anyway, you don't know where life's leading you. And it felt like an act, like a purposeful act. But yeah, and it's interesting. Maybe if I had been a little bit older and a little bit more mature, would I have done something differently? I
don't interpret what you did as a lack of maturity in any way, shape, or form. No, it's just interesting
what your grandpa and your dad did when faced with sort of,
But they were coming from the opposite direction.
Yeah.
They were coming from not keeping any kashrut except for in the home. And then I think there was, I imagine, a thought of, and I know people have done this in other things as well, in less sort of desperate situations, but I know of people who, when they found out they were pregnant, were like, almost kind of, you kind of make a deal with God, whether you explicitly say it or whether it's just subconscious in there, that like, well, if I do this, sort of, please make sure everything goes okay, kind of thing. And I know people who have kept kosher from that point on, and I guess that's a similar thing of like, you're in this desperate situation, please help, and in return I'll do it. And I'm not saying, I've never spoken to them about it, so I don't know that that's what their thought process was, but I imagine it's sort of, so it's a similar thing, whereas you were coming from,
I was probably coming from a place of anger, and also I think a place of, life feels really tough, let's not make it harder. And also, I enjoyed food. I was I don't like the phrase I'm a foodie, because it makes you sound like a wanker. Sorry,
No.
But food has always been something like a lever of joy for me in tough times. And I felt like there were certain things that I was like, do you know what? I mean, I've said it already, but a prosciutto board was like, that was a bit of me.
Yeah.
Like cured meats, and especially with some cheese and some olives, glass of wine. Ooh, getting a bit.
Do you need to take a minute?
Just. But this is one of those things that like, Vosh doesn't cut it. Vosh does not equal a cured, Italian meat or whatever.
Vosh is lowest common denominator meat. It doesn't mean it's not got a place.
It's got
It's absolutely got a place. Fried Vosh is, but For me, it's sort of twice a
year.
year.
Put it in a shakshuka. I think you tell me to do that once.
The little cabanas sausages, I used to fry those off.
Oh right, no, they're kind of nice as a fake chorizo, bit of a shakshuka.
But not really with the. I do that with the cabanas, which I've not had for years. But I used to do that a lot. You fry them off, and then or a pasta as well.
Salt in my mouth when you say cabanas.
Yeah.
My mum used to find occasionally from the butchers in North Manchester something called top rib. Have you ever had that?
Oh, I don't. I've heard it.
And it sizzles like a similar bacon. Sort of. I mean, is
I
not
like it.
Yeah, but we used to put that in sandwiches and white bread and brown sauce, and that was our token bit of attempted assimilation.
Happy days.
Talking of foods that sort of make us drool, the verboten foods that make us drool. For me, prosciutto, but and also when I was dabbling on the dark side, it's not, no judgment. The other thing that has no equivalent if you keep the level of kashrut that I do are scallops, because they are sort of in between meat and fish. They're like a meaty fish, and I enjoyed the sort of texture when you're kind of torn between what kind of meal am I after. And they take flavour beautifully, and that's...
It's interesting because I used to watch a lot of cooking shows. I love food and would watch stuff, and MasterChef, they were always forever making scallops as their starter. Forever, or any cooking show, it was always like, scallops. And I was like, well, there must be something good about them.
Yeah, I think that it was quite unique. I mean, unless, I'm willing to be corrected, but there is nothing that I think, within my little dollops of vosh.
It's so versatile. You can do it in the shape of scallops.
You'd have to pile it high a bit. Ooh, grim. What about you? Was there anything that you lusted after or still lust after?
I genuinely think that if I didn't keep kosher and hadn't done through growing up, that I'd be clinically obese. I think I'd just eat junk food and everything. So I think I used to lust over the sort of, the kind of fried chicken thing, the sort of KFC, the adverts just looked so good.
Can I tell you something? As someone who loves a bit of fried chicken, KFC Nisht for me.
Really?
Too greasy compared to some others.
I imagine, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I've had it, as I say, when I was travelling.
There goes our sponsorship from KFC.
There was a place once in London for a short while on that row of Golders Green called Kosher Fried Chicken KFC, which I just respected the chutzpah there.
Yeah.
But the big one is curry's the one I feel like I miss out on. I love Indian food and I do love, like fish curry. There's lots of it. It's very authentic. You can get it in lots of different ways. But I always felt like if I was getting a takeaway from somewhere, or if I was out for a curry with the boys, where you could just go to any curry house, usually the sort of, if they weren't like a speciality base, so they didn't have lots of fish options, it was a bit like, what have we got that looks like fish? Whereas the sort of, the kind of butter chicken curry looks amazing, but also lamb curries. I feel like I've never really experienced authentic lamb curry, because a lot of it, uses milk. I remember we used to go to one curry house in London quite a lot in Hampstead called Paradise, that a lot of people will know, I'm sure.
I used to sing that every time I drove past.
Oh, really? Yeah. The guy would always be like, hey, have a shot with me at the end of the meal. And you're like, a shot? I want to go home. Just eating a massive meal.
So full.
But I would order, they did like a tandoori trout, and you would get like the masala sauce, but everyone will be halfway through the curry by the time I've taken the fish off the bone, basically.
I just want to put out that Arron Ferster knows his way around a boned fish, to the point where I think I once texted you from Spain to be like, Arron, which fish should I order and how do I...
I should have been a fish surgeon. In another life, I would have been a fish surgeon.
And what is the most batshit thing you've ever done in the name of keeping kosher?
Well, I noticed you suggested this bit, and I think it's looking at our sort of respective lists. I think we better go alternately on this. Yeah. So I think the first one was the aforementioned tuna story, squeezing tuna out of a sort of metallic toothpaste
straight into your mouth.
Straight into my mouth.
Yeah. Well, I've already talked about my eating Chinese takeaways in the garden, and I'm pretty sure at one point my brother, when we must have been teenagers, I think he wanted to rent one of those outdoor heaters to facilitate this practice throughout the seasons. And then also, I was probably about 21 until I learned that pepperoni wasn't beef, because my dad enjoyed an American pizza at Pizza Express, which was possibly the most middle-class story I could share. But he told me it was beef because he really enjoyed pepperoni.
I feel like I wouldn't have known that as a kid, despite not eating it, I wouldn't have known, because I think part of the genius of the advertising as well was, it was, even though you were eating a little character with a voice and a personality.
But that's a pepperami. I'm talking about pepperoni.
And those are different. I'm definitely not learning that at the age of 40. That those are different things. Yeah, it's a bit of an animal. Yeah.
Pepperoni is, again, this is might have been my Vosh blindness, but it's like a salami. It's a, and it's fucking delicious on a pizza.
I bet. It does look good. That is, again, something that I can kind of look at and go, that's got to be adding value.
But I definitely revealed my sort of, that's beef, right? Like, far too old.
Another sort of batshit crazy kashrut story for me is during, and I'm sure we'll have a whole separate section in a Pesach episode on Pesach packed lunches, but I once lost a day of work because I couldn't write K at work. I'd taken a kosher packed lunch, a Pesach packed lunch to work, and some matzah had got stuck under the K of my keyboard, and I couldn't write K for the rest of the day. Which, when you're writing a script, is not the best thing to happen. But God. It was just, that was it. It was like, how'd you lose your day today? It's like,
God, just a bit of
matzah stuck under the cakey.
I mean, I think talking of batshit crazy stuff you do in the name of keeping kosher, just Pesach, like,
in
just
general,
how much you can spend on kosher Pesach food. I mean, I just think it's some sort of, I think it's a scam. But
that's a whole separate episode.
Yeah. But there was a time when my grandma used to buy kosher Pesach Diet Coke.
Really? Well, no, we still do that.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, I know. Because in COVID, it was revealed that all of these things were fine.
Well, again, this is a big old discussion for, I think, because the COVID list has done no favours to the Beth Din. That's come back to haunt them.
Yeah. Oh, I've been around Japan with a specifically translated sheet of paper to say no pork, no shellfish, dairy and meat okay. Slide that across.
So I've gotten really quite proficient at condensing Leviticus into, those text boxes when you're booking like a fancy restaurant, and you need to sort of like, basically, if it's a celebration and we're going, for something, and you want to experience the restaurant, but basically it's one of those menus that you look at and you're like, everything's got a little bit of something in it.
Yeah.
And you're booking a few months in advance because it's A, hard to get into, and B, it's a special occasion, so the date or whatever. So I've really gotten down sort of these are our requirements, can you make a menu? And the best places are the ones that will sort of do a special thing for you, where they'll like print you a separate menu or whatever, and they'll really think about it and make sure that you're not missing out on the experience. But it's quite an art to get it down to, because they're usually like 300 carats or something, and it's like, there's mention of fins and scales, there's mentions of, dairy and milk and meat and the rest of it.
But I think, people have been doing, it's interesting, people have been doing, my grandma used to, if she'd accidentally use a meat fork for a milk purpose, you'd just find cutlery stuck up in the soil in a back garden.
Really?
Yeah, because that was a way of koshering it again. I mean, I think just all aspects of keeping kosher are slightly batshit, but there's a rhyme and reason.
Whole, liturgy that's grown up around every single rule, and kashrut is one of the most sort of studied, and, so there are eventualities for everything. And there's things like, I think it's if something is contaminated, if it's less than a 60th of, if it's a mistake, if it's done accidentally and it's less than a 60th of the ingredients, then I think you can still eat it, is sort of one of the rulings.
Exemplify that somehow?
Say, for example, and there are these examples that are given, and again, I am not an authority, I may be slightly misremembering.
You are on this show.
Okay, say you're making your chicken soup, okay, and you've got your big pot of chicken soup, and I don't know, you've got a decorator around, and the decorator is not sticking to the rules that the sandwiches should be eaten, the bacon barm should be eaten in the van or whatever, and say a speck of his sandwich was somehow to fly into the chicken soup pot, and you knew this had happened. The question is, do you need to throw away the contents of the chicken soup?
Right.
And the answer is no, because A, it was an accident, and B, it is clearly less than a 60th of the meal that you're having, and that's good to go, I believe. Again, check with your rabbi. I'm not entirely sure. That example may defy 50 other smaller laws that have come across, but yeah, all sorts.
It is fascinating. You can understand why people ask me about two dishwashers.
100%.
Because it does open up this whole world of questions. And especially when you are Jews like us, and as we say, there are loads of ways of being Jewish in this country, but we are Jews who kind of appear secular by every other sort of facet, and yet we have all these kind of weird things about eating.
Yeah.
So which begs the question, why do we do it?
It's a really interesting one, and it's one that I think a lot of people, we rarely do question it because it's just either what you're growing up with or what you found yourself doing or whether it fits. And for me, it's largely, the way I was raised. And, it was a big part of what we did to be Jewish, and still really, I think I'll add into that a sense of guilt, because I think when we were kids, it was, we eat kosher, so you don't eat that. And I think there was an element of, that is bad, as a result, we don't, not with any kind of judgment attached to the objects, obviously, but just like, we don't do that. But there was a sense of guilt there, probably. That said, I've gotten to that age where, I went traveling, I tried it. The decision to go back to it was more of my own decision. And I've kept it since. And I think really it's the one thing that I do every day without thinking for the vast majority of the time that sort of marks out my Judaism in a way. And it's one thing that's quite visibly different. So while I don't wear a kippah and I don't, sort of wear traditional garb or have payas or any of that, my non-Jewish colleagues or non-Jewish friends would know that I was kosher because there were certain things that I weren't eating or whatever, and also I wasn't quiet about it. But generally, so it's just it's the one thing I do that marks out my Judaism. So that I think that's why I do it, and why Anna and I are bringing up our kids to do it. But it's also made easy by the fact that I married Anna, who was also kosher, so we didn't have to have that thing of, what level are we going to keep? If anything, my kashrut's probably gone slightly more strict because Anna was brought up in a stricter way. But I've also learned good little facts that I didn't know before. Like if you have milk after meat, you're supposed to wait 3 hours. It's like the sort of Western UK accepted Ashkenazi version, even though I think like for the Dutch, it's like an hour or whatever.
Right.
Various things. But I always thought that if you were having meat after milk, you had to wait an hour and a half. I think these things just got like conflated in my head. You don't need to wait, it turns out, really. Or you just need to have a glass of water or, clean your mouth a bit. It's not as milk. Yeah, if you have meat after milk, there's no real time limit on what you have to have. It's more the other way around.
I feel that's less useful because you really just want a bit of dairy milk after your chicken.
Absolutely. Yeah. On our honeymoon, as a result, we managed to get kosher meat in the place we were staying. And as a result, though, Anna, who can sort of give or take meat, she's not a massive meat eater, but I was very keen on having some because we'd been somewhere else where we couldn't have it, and it'd been like 10 days or whatever without meat or whatever. So Anna insisted we go to the buffet first and have dessert, and then go and have our main course, and I respected that immensely.
Anna loves a bit of dessert.
She loves a bit of dessert.
Yeah. I don't know why. Why do I do it? Again, I think that thing of that I think a lot of people might say is that it was the way I was raised. It was the way I was brought up. And it's kind of a bit of a reflex in terms of an answer, but doesn't really explain because we are now 40. Yeah. And so I think for a while though, there was a sense of pleasing the elders. Yeah. I remember when Jamie said something in front of my grandma about, Abigail always likes a McDonald's at an airport, which is A, true. But B, and I was like, Jamie, shut up. I just didn't want that admit. And he was like, you are 38.
And were you there when I made Carmen delete a video or something of me? She'd like taken a video of me ordering a fillet of fish, I will say, in a McDonald's. But I was like, I'm friends with some of the Portnoy kids on Facebook. I was like, you've got to delete that. Take it down now. We ended up having an argument. And I knew how ludicrous it was at the time.
And I think that is the wrong reason to, I think, caring about what others think. But I think that is something that permeates the community.
Yeah.
But I'm guilty of it, not just in terms of keeping kosher. But I think as I've got older and more mature, and obviously I have had a journey with it, and as we've talked about, for me at a time, it was a sense of like 2 fingers up to everything and everyone that I suppose when that sort of idyllic childhood got shattered by my parents' illness, I was like, well, that can go out as well. And I came back to it, and there was something, it sounds, this Batshit, which is obviously a prevalent word in this conversation, but when Jamie and I went on honeymoon, and I specified our dietary requirements and they matched.
Yeah.
I found something about that, like, this is who we are. Yeah. Like, as a couple and as a family, this is who we are. And I found something quite lovely about that. Yeah. Which is not something I can, really can explain, but I don't know. I think now it is, obviously I'm getting questions from Lily, similar questions. I remember asking my mum, well, if we're not allowed X, Y, Z, what are non-Jews not allowed? I just felt like, it's only fair. And
obviously, there's eternal salvation.
I was like, well, if we're doing this, and I remember her going, chopped liver? Props to that.
I love chopped liver. That doesn't seem a fair swap.
Yeah, exactly. But there is that connection to your identity is just explicitly manifested in what you eat and what you don't eat. And again, when other lines are blurred slightly, and obviously my kashrut lines are blurred, there's something about that, particularly in the home, that, gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling inside. In fact, I was trying to decipher my mum's chicken soup recipe after she had passed.
I love this story. I remember,
And it was cryptic. And then, because she'd emailed it to me, I think when, like 10 years earlier when I was living in London, and I found it, I printed it out, and I kept it. It's just, an example of just keep this shit. And I just couldn't quite figure it out. Your Anna was helping me, my auntie was helping me. And eventually I spoke to Hayden, who is the kosher butcher who delivers down here, which is very useful. And I was texting him, he's the one who texts me the most.
So genuinely, I hate the phone. I don't keep in touch with friends on WhatsApp. Me and Hayden, he's the only one I sort of text back.
And he called me and he helped me decipher this recipe and said, is this a grandma? I said, well, it's my mum's, but it would have been my grandma. I said, well, you don't need to use this, you don't need to do this step because that was when hens were like this. And he taught me through it, and just him taking the time and having that conversation, I got a bit emotional, and it was just, I really felt like I was in a shtetl, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And it's just that connection between, that bond that comes over things like that. I think it's really valuable. And
I remember you telling me that story at the time, and I already liked Hayden just because he makes exceedingly good sausages.
He does.
But it also, on a personal level, I've never met him. We only message and share the occasional picture. We don't. But it did make me think, oh, wow, that's really, that's going the extra mile. Yeah. And people talk about, like within a non-Jewish thing as well, like the old sort of, like the village butcher or something. And it gave that sense of togetherness and just helping out and going the extra mile kind of thing. So kudos to Hayden of Whitefield. It is just, I think his shop's called Hayden's.
Yes,
it's not just like being purposefully exclusive, but just sort of like first name basis. That's
that's where we are. That's where we do what we do.
Indeed. So if we come to Nisht for me,
shall we make it keep it on theme? The unkosher food, which is just Nisht for you. We've talked about the ones that would be like number one on the list, but what's Nisht for you?
For me, it's the big one. It's pig. It's just pig products. It's so hardwired into me that I've never even felt tempted at all. Not even by the smell. It's almost visceral at times. Occasionally, you get the whiff of a banger, like on a barbecue or whatever. And it's like, oh, that smells good. And I remember I went to Vienna recently with some pals, and they were all digging into like big hot dogs. And the ones that weren't obviously weirdly pale did look sort of good. But I wasn't like, there's no sort of, oh, I wish I was eating that.
What were you eating while they were eating hot dogs?
Dry pretzels. There was a lot of potato.
Tuna.
There was a lot of potato-based stuff going on. Cool. I find like the smell of bacon and the sort of those kind of big Iberico legs of ham that you get hanging down. The look of them repulsed me. I was like, why would you have this as decor? This is mental. This is like me hanging a shit from the ceiling, like a prize shit. So I've never, that for me, it's just, It's not, but I do. It just reminded me though that I remember getting. So I went to KD, a primary school. I remember getting to my non-Jewish senior school, and getting to lunch, and I think I was on like a vegetarian meal card or something. And I remember just seeing a friend from KD tucking into a sausage, and my instinctual thing. And this person was like the best in our class at Hebrew. And I remember being like, no, that's, you can't have, that's not beef. And he just going like, yeah, no. And I was like, oh, okay. Sorry, as you were. Carry
We're not
on.
all plagued with the guilt.
No, some people were just brought up when they just didn't eat kosher and they were absolutely fine with it, quite rightly.
Or they just dealt with it better than us.
Yeah, it was like slapped it out of his hand. But yeah.
No, for me, it's, and actually, seafood, scallops aside, like even when I dabbled, and once I went on a girls' holiday to New York and I dabbled in prawns, and I was so sick the next day, and we were flying home the next day. It was not good, and at that point I thought, oh, that's a shame. Wagging his finger at me, but. The crab and the lobster, which they all go...
Both noble animals. It's just, sorry, it's the way you said that. The crab, the lobster.
No, but it's because they're held in such high esteem. Like, they just go, like, nuts for them. But it looks like so much effort. I can see, I was recently with a friend, and she ordered stone crab. I don't know.
Yeah.
And she was like hacking away, trying to get it. I think she had to wear a bib and trying to get the meat. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so much effort for a meal.
So that's your...
Nisht for me. I don't want to try that hard to eat.
Weirdly though, I think because those things look so alien, I've got a friend who is Jewish and I think was probably brought up similar to us, but made a very conscious decision to pack all that in and loves
no judgment,
shellfish, seafood, everything. And I remember going on holiday with him, being sat opposite him as he had like a big sort of seafood paella. And I remember looking at these these king prawns and stuff that were coming off this thing, and they look so wrong that actually my reaction to that was, that must taste amazing.
Because
to put that in your
so
mouth,
gross.
looking like that must taste sensational. So I'm weirdly curious. I'll never go there.
Yeah.
I don't mean to never say never. I don't think I'll ever go there. But weirdly, I find that and sort of crab and lobster. And I guess the whole thing about that, I guess there's a sense of ritual there of how you go about eating it.
Maybe.
But also at the same time, I'm sort of like, it looks like so much work that it must be so good to go to that level.
Nisht for me, I don't want to have to wait that long.
I mean, it's literally nisht for me because I won't have it.
No. And I never dabbled with anything with a visible tentacle.
Or testicle.
Both. I mean, who wants that on a plate? And again, these are things that are considered delicacies. Okay.
I respect that.
But, no judgment. And as, again, I think you and I are quite similar.
Yeah.
In terms of, obviously, I dabble more than you, but there are a myriad of ways of being Jewish in this country that involve nothing to do with whatever you put in your mouth.
Absolutely, indeed, in more respect than one.
And on that note,
there we are. Enkelahenu, Adonalam. That's the end of the episode. But I enjoyed chatting. I agree with you. I think, the motto we were always brought up with, knowing that we did certain things and didn't do certain things, what it is just, it's up to everyone to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And and that doesn't make somebody more or less Jewish than somebody else. It really is.
No.
You pick and choose. Some people choose to do everything. Some people choose to do nothing.
And some people choose to confuse their children.
Yes.
Like me.
Well, I think we all do that.
Mikey still doesn't understand why he can't get Parmesan on bolognese in the house. But we'll figure it out.
I don't think Nat understands that, despite the fact that he knows he keeps going. I don't think he really...
No, but he can get it when we're out. But he can't have it in our house.
Okay, yeah.
And, he's
I find
4.
the Mummy's Kitchen, in my Mummy's Kitchen, which was a Jewish nursery song, is quite helpful for that.
Okay.
Like when Nat's like, why can't I have an ice cream now? And you're like, in my Mummy's Kitchen, there are lots of things to eat.
I don't know that one.
It's a good
but
one.
That's when we'll be calling Uncle Arron.
Yeah, well, that's extra subscriber content, I think. You can get those lyrics printed.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and like and subscribe and all those things. Again, still need to look into whether that's actually a thing.
We don't know.
But please do tell your friends, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.